Programmatic's been
Hmm.
using AI for some time. It's a machine-based learning model to buy media, and it works really, really well.
What is up, everyone? I'm Shay Weintraub, producer and general enjoyer of the AI Wave podcast. Today's podcast is going to be a little bit different than you're used to, starting off with the fact that I'm kicking it off, not our host, Chris Parisi. For this episode, we conducted a remote interview, and the tech wasn't totally on our side. I promise you the machines are not turning against us. It was just some technical difficulties with the video production. With that being said, if you're watching this video on YouTube, you'll notice Chris's video quality is a little bit different. If you're listening through Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your audio podcasts, you've got nothing to worry about. I promise. Today's guest comes to us all the way from the Charlotte suburbs. But don't worry, Rhode Islanders, he is still a Patriots fan. Go Tom Brady. Joe Leverone is the Supervisor of Media Strategy at Brkthru, a digital media company that was recently named to Inc.'s list of fastest growing companies in America. Joe and Chris get to talking about media buying, programmatics, and AI, and Joe floats an idea at the end for listeners that you don't want to miss out on. If you're in the marketing sector, you're going to love this interview, guaranteed. Without further ado, here's Chris and Joe.
All right, welcome guest. Today we have Joe Leverone here from Brkthru. We're going to actually talk about the impact of AI on marketing on this episode, so I'm very excited to have Joe here. Joe, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be with you guys.
Yeah, so Joe, you're obviously in the marketing space working at Brkthru, but before we get into the nuts and bolts of it all, tell our audience a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? I heard you actually in the pre-interview here that you're a Patriots fan living in Carolina. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I was actually born not too far from you guys. I was up in Manchester, New Hampshire, for my childhood. Currently, I live right outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, but on the South Carolina side, trips up a lot of people. But I've been working through Brkthru for close to 4 years. Really started my journey in digital marketing around 2017, where I got a strong foothold on the programmatic side, and then eventually came to Brkthru, where I started out as a media trader, and then we created a strategy department, and that's where I work now. And I kind of get to work at the intersection of research and really the technical aspects of programmatic media buying, and I absolutely love it. So, really happy with where I am and happy to be talking to you guys about what we're doing.
And then before 2017, were you not in the marketing space at all?
I actually, my first job out of the gate was as a news producer at a TV station in Rochester, New York. Really enjoyed it, but I think that seeing the growth in the digital space was really attractive to me, and that's where I wanted to follow for my career.
That's cool. And you said created a strategy department. So was there not one before you got there? And if so, what was that like creating one?
Yeah, so um, as I started for about the first 2 years, there wasn't a strategy department here. But as Brkthru has evolved, there's been a growing need for that, and our clients are really appreciative and receptive to the strategy that we provide. So our leadership department, those folks ended up creating the strategy department. We're a small but nimble team, and we touch a lot of the business, pre-sale, post-sale, and everything in between. So really proud of my team, what we do, and just continue to be a rocket ship and grow this thing.
That's exciting. And part of the growth is really executing media planning really well, I'm assuming.
Absolutely.
Tell us about what media planning is for our audience if they're not aware. But then also, what's your role when it comes to the strategy component of media planning and buying?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And a lot of that comes back to research. I feel very fortunate that Brkthru invests quite a bit into research tools that we can use to help inform our media plans so that we can speak to buyer habits, consumer journey, brand discovery? Where are people learning about new products? What social media platforms are they using? How much time per day do they spend on their laptops, their phones? Where do we want to reach them? Where's the most efficient way we can start before we even make an optimization in a campaign? And that excites me, and that's really part of my role right now is making sure that we are um, getting our campaigns off to a point where they're set up for success before our media team of experts even, lifts a finger to start optimizing.
Now that sounds like a lot of data points that you just mentioned.
Yes.
A little bit creepy, right? If you're not in the marketing space, you're like, "Whoa, you guys have so much information about us." And us marketers will be like, "Yeah, well, we actually used to have more until these privacy laws." But
That's 100% true. Yes.
so it's made it more difficult, but good for privacy. Um, I'm sure AI must have a role in that research component since there's so many data sets and points to be looking into.
Yeah, it's really interesting how we're seeing the research component of advertising evolve. Um, we on my team have been testing it quite a bit. So we'll just use for this instance ChatGPT as an example of getting, you know, asking questions to get insight on a specific, consumer habit, things like that. What we have found is right now the technology is really promising, but it's not quite there yet. Some things that I see that worry me, two main things. The lack of being able to source information that comes out from an AI model. Sometimes it can give you a great answer, but if you don't know where that source of information is, you don't want to call it a fact quite yet. Is it taking, from a blog by some Joe out there, or is it coming from a university journal? Those are really important things to know. And AI can't necessarily provide those in some circumstances. There are tools that are making that progressively easier, but we're just not quite there yet. The other thing that I really want to be careful of when we're doing research and using AI is, and you see this when you use the tools, is it talks about biases. And this tool is experimental, it may show bias. We want to make sure that that's not part of what we're doing in our consumer research. So the way I view tools like ChatGPT and others is really as a good starting point. It's a good way to put in a prompt and get ideas flowing on what direction you need to look in.
That's a great point. Those two key limitations currently with AI. You talked about the first one, which is the lack of sources. Now, I know there are more advancements in other tools other than GPT that are sourcing. There's Perplexity, I think even Google Bard. I'm looking down to our producer Shay. Even Google Bard limits, not limits, but names the sources as well.
Mhm.
But that's a good point. When you when you have research, you have to source where that information's coming from and vet it out. And the same thing with your second point there. And the common thread there is that you still need that human involvement.
Right.
It's up to us to take that information that AI is providing and review it, edit it, tweak it, confirm that it's accurate. But like you said, it saves a lot of time to get the ball rolling and to get the gears turning, so to speak. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. And from my perspective in my seat is if you can get your hands around prompting AI in a smart way, it will be 10 times more helpful. So, we have heard the term prompt engineering, right? It's probably a fancier term than it really deserves, but there are ways to get smarter answers out of ChatGPT, Bard, and more. and it's the prompting. So what I like to do, and this helps me dramatically save time, is tell ChatGPT or Bard who I am, what I'm an expert in, not me personally, but I'm just telling, hey, you are a researcher, um, you know, looking at consumer habits for people who are going to buy pizza on Friday, just as an example, and really putting AI in a position and then start asking questions like you have 10 years of experience. What about some of your customers should I know? And that's going to get you a much more helpful answer than just typing in, you know, people who buy pizza, tell me about their demographics. 10 out of 10
Right.
times. And something else I encourage people to do too is put something like that in, but also add, ask me any follow-up questions before you provide me your final answer.
Yep.
And that will save you so much time and end up getting you an answer that's going to point you in the right direction very quickly.
Great points. Definitely do the same for the prompting. And one other thing I'll do at the end, because you'll start one direction, and after telling it, nope, you're wrong there, let's edit this, let's go this.
Yep.
What I'll also do is say, all right, now that you know what the output that I was expecting, what would have been the best prompt to prompt you? And it will generate a prompt that I'll then copy and paste and use moving forward
Yeah.
for whatever that application is. So really good points there on the research phase, and kind of backing it up. We talked about media planning. So for our audience, what we're talking about is, let's say you're a large advertiser, a large brand that sells, let's say, microphone for podcasts, let's say podcast equipment.
Yep.
And what they'll do is they'll hire marketers like us to say, hey, I want to sell more of these online, and you need to figure it out how. And I have a budget of $10,000 a month,
Mm-hmm.
let's say. Figure it out. And what we'll do is we'll do the research to figure out the audience and the pain points and the value prop about the business, about the product, and about the pricing, and
Mm-hmm.
all of that research to then go ahead and buy the media targeting those audiences with the right messaging and the right channels based on where they are at.
Right.
So that's that research phase that Joe was just talking about. Now, let's say you figured out all the research. What's the next step in this media planning process?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So one of the things we're going to look at first is, once we identify the consumer and a bit more about who they are, we want to learn what their habits are online. How much time do you spend on social media? How much time do you spend reading the news? More recently, it's how much time do you spend on connected TV? Because that medium is growing exponentially. And from there, we can drill down even further. So this demographic in the Providence DMA watches 30 minutes of connected TV a day. Okay, well, what genres, what programs? And then what we're going to do is look to make specific buys to reach those people where they are, and what they're watching from the research that we're getting, and then setting up deals with publishers. And then, we talk about more about programmatic media buying. And one of the things that's really interesting to me is that programmatic media buying is something that's been using AI for some time. So AI is, coming on the scene. It's a very hot topic. It seems like everyone's including it in their pitches, right? But programmatic's been
Mm-hmm.
using AI for some time. It's a machine-based learning model to buy media, and it works really, really well. So
How does it work?
Right. So it is an automated bidding solution for a media buyer. So when you're on CNN.com and you see a little banner on the side, there's people that are actually bidding on that impression to get in front of you at that time. So how AI helps is with how much do I bid to win while also spending the lowest amount possible. We call that predictive clearing price. So with programmatic, what you can do is really start to use the large amounts of data that you're getting and start making inferences about, okay, Chris is on CNN. I can reach him. How much should I bid to get an ad in front of Chris? And use historical data based on machine learning to know, okay, I should spend X amount of dollars to reach Chris in this instance. So it's really an automated buying solution where you think about 20 years ago on buying a newspaper. I just want to buy an ad in the sports section for my sports bar. Well, programmatic can get you your sports bar's ad on a blog for a specific team website. Football season's coming up. We can go on specific blogs and automate the purchasing of ads through there. So there are a lot of ways that programmatic has used AI, but I think that that's only going to continue to grow. And the future is really bright for programmatic media buying because of that. It already has an established presence with artificial intelligence, but that bid optimization and machine learning is only going to continue to get more efficient, which in turn should allow media buyers to be able to spend more time on things like strategy. We talk about AI as something that can streamline things like emails or internal communication. It should eventually be able to streamline more than that for people to be able to work on different things throughout their day that will ultimately just help the business and save people time.
So with programmatic, you explained it well, and it was a more simple version of AI that's been around for years
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to machine learning. Now, that must mean that those machines are learning based on a lot of data. I'm guessing, right? But it's not like generative AI. It's not communicating back and forth. So, is there a way where even programmatic or any type of media buying is going to be changed due to AI in the next year or so, or is it just going to be an evolution of what's already existed?
So it's going to change, and there and it may not be the way that you might first think. So what's happening with AI in these large language models is they're able to output a tremendous amount of content in a very short amount of time. That content is making its way all over the internet. So there was a study I was reading about 2 weeks ago that the mass production of AI content could account for as much as 90% of information on the internet a few years down the line. And
Wow.
here's something that concerns me about that is, as you know, the the large language models are not perfect. They're going to put out some inaccuracies. Sometimes they'll do so confidently. Um, what that what the risk brings to programmatic is do you want your brand to align with some of this content that's out there? So what programmatic marketers need to be really aware of is the amount of information and website availability that's only going to continue to grow as more information is being put out there more quickly. There's something going on in the space called made for advertising websites, which is a scheme by bad actors to make you feel like you're reading a legitimate publication, let's just say the Providence Journal. It has the look and feel of that, but it's all AI generated content. And what they're doing is putting ad slots in there to monetize that. Brkthru has a blog on this phenomenon on our website. which I highly recommend people take a look at because there are AIs, it, as we talked about, it's saving time, it's giving us solutions, but it's also giving us issues out of our hands kind of externally. In terms of how it can help, I see it being able to generate, keyword lists very quickly. I see it being able to, you mentioned, Chris, the amount of data that goes into programmatic media buying. It can allow someone who's not a data scientist to put that data into one of these machines like ChatGPT and start asking questions that they might not otherwise be able to get themselves the answers
Mm.
for, that is. So I think it's going to democratize data quite a bit. And we've started to see that here at Breakthrough, and I'm really excited to see how that works in the future.
Interesting. All right, so now let's continue along the theme here where we talked about um, strategy before media buying. We talked about media buying and programmatic. And now you just touched upon the optimization, data science part of advertising. How has AI impacted the post-publish optimizations outside of, bid adjustments and machine learning bid strategies? How has AI has helped with that? I'm assuming a lot on like the reporting side of things, data analyzing and optimizations. How has AI helped out with that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And what it can do is help inform the next campaign. So say we just ran, Chris, you and I just ran a 6 month campaign selling the microphone that you're using today. What we
Mm-hmm.
can do thereafter, similar to what I was just talking about, is plugging in the data, the CTR, the website placements we were using. Which sites saw the most conversions? Okay, so this is something you could see in a spreadsheet, but we can ask AI more about these websites. We can ask it what else is out there similar to these that we can include in our renewal. Once again, it's more of a starting point than an actual full-fledged solution where you get an answer, you put it in the next campaign, and you're done. That's not how it works
Mm-hmm.
right now, but it does a good job of being able to give you sources you might not otherwise think of. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And it kind of connects to the next question that I had, which here on the AI wave, you'll always hear me say AI is not here to replace you, but to enhance you.
Exactly.
That's a big motto that we have is that, not everyone's going to be replaced. And even if we're doing things that used to take 10 hours that takes 2 hours, well, that just gives us 8 hours to be better, to be more strategic, to be more creative, whatever it may be. But you talked about it throughout this whole conversation about how AI is not perfect, but it is a helper. Helps you out. Maybe Shay can mark that time down when I was just screwing up. But how AI can not replace you but enhance you. Talk about some examples of where you feel strongly like it is not going to replace us anytime soon, but it definitely will enhance us.
Yeah. So there's two examples that are very similar. Um, so we talked about the rush for a lot of companies, especially publicly traded companies, to come to market with AI solutions. There are two that come to mind. Google and Facebook specifically have released media buying methods called Advantage Plus in Facebook's case, and Performance Max in Google's case, which
Mm.
really what it aims to do is run a campaign essentially for someone, um, giving them minimal work to do during the campaign, and promises to optimize accordingly towards conversions or CTR. anything that you really tell it to. But when you look deeper into those products, you realize that it's kind of a black box. And the transparency you would expect out of these companies just really isn't there yet. Um, when I look at these type of products, it does scare me a little bit because I'm not able to get the full amount of information that I can otherwise through a more traditional buying method. And traditional in this case is still programmatic. But when if someone's running a performance max campaign, pulling reporting on how it came to certain decisions on where to put your ad is not intuitive, and in some cases, it's not even possible. Or in the example of Advantage Plus for Facebook, there may be settings on in Advantage Plus that you would never run if you set the campaign up yourself, but they exist there. For example, you may run ads next to other advertisers who are in the same kind of business category as you. Do you want to be sharing an ad space with them? That's a question up for the advertiser, but it's going to happen unless you know to go in there and turn it off, and it's not intuitive.
It's interesting. I know some of our media buyers here in house at Trailblaze, have mixed feelings about, let's say, Performance Max with Google Ads. And, one side, oh, wow, this is great. It's going to optimize based on the machine learning. And the other side, it's limiting. You can only do so much,
Right.
and it doesn't want the human to do that much. And we don't always trust Google. They're in the advertising business to make money. So, sometimes we're just like, gone be the days of the old manual CPC bid strategy, where for all you marketing nerds out there, you know what I'm talking about. And yeah, these big advertising platforms like Google, like Meta, are utilizing AI in a way that's going to most likely benefit themselves. Obviously, they want the advertiser to benefit, so they keep spending money. But we as media buyers and managers, we like to have some sense of control so that we can tweak because we know what's best for our clients and our advertisers that AI just may not know, like the examples that you mentioned before.
We want to be
So
strong stewards of the dollars that our clients, allow us to buy media for them. And to not have that control gives a sense of uncertainty. And in the case of Performance Max and Advantage Plus, if you are running, a really small 3-person business from your house, maybe it really is a great product for you. But if you're running media at scale, just as you were saying, the lack of control for seasoned media buyers can be a little unsettling.
So now we talked about the full process of media buying, media planning, how AI is used throughout each of the stages. Now, kind of share with our audience. You're into AI, Joe. How else do you use AI outside of what we talked about? Are there any AI tools that you use professionally as well? Kind of give our audience any tips or tricks that may help them out in their journey.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. So earlier in this conversation, you mentioned Bard, and after I had mentioned ChatGPT, I actually prefer Bard to ChatGPT, and kind of feel like, because ChatGPT came to market sooner, that it gets the lion's share of attention. But I encourage people out there who have only used tools like ChatGPT to give Bard a chance. I think that, as we were just talking about Google and all the power that it has, it also applies to, this, this corner of the AI room as well. Um, in terms of other tools that I use it for, right now it's mostly on the research side. I do look at some of the agents out there. To be honest, I haven't found a lot of use for them yet. I think that 5 years down the line, they could be something that like are truly a personal assistant to people. It's not there yet. But it's really exciting to think about because there are really smart people putting all of this together. And just because I say right now is a starting point doesn't mean, Chris, that you and I are back here in 2 years and this conversation is completely different. And that's the really cool part about talking about this right now, is knowing that tomorrow I could get a newsletter in my inbox that just makes a lot of what we talked about today, you know, totally different in context of a new product that could come out, or ChatGPT, 4.5 or something like that. So,
I mean, the rate of change is astronomical with AI.
right.
That's what's exciting, but also definitely scary for people as well.
So one of the things about how fast AI is changing that I think makes marketers uniquely capable of adapting is the fact that we are always having to adapt to change. You mentioned privacy earlier. How much our buying strategies are having to change as the third-party cookies deprecates, and privacy laws in California and other states, and your iPhone with such limited tracking, when people are opting out. I think that puts people in a familiar mindset with AI. Is this is always changing, but so are all the things I'm working on right now. And to me, I think that's exciting for our industry.
I agree. If you want an easy career that's not complicated, don't go into marketing. Marketing's always changing, and it's very competitive, and you always have to stay on top. And as the AI person around here, those newsletters, you read one of them and then the next day you read another one, and you're just filled with all of this information. Things are always changing. It's definitely hard to keep up with, but it's important, no matter your field. Obviously, if you're in marketing, it's definitely important, but really almost any field that you're in, it's important to, subscribe to our own newsletter, for instance, at the AI Wave, where we're providing information to try to keep it simple, always sharing some new tools and some new things that are going on. But, you mentioned, Joe, that it's important to understand that there's opportunities with AI, but there's also some dangers and roadblocks and limitations. And that's why here on our podcast in Rhode Island, we are calling out the state to say, hey, let's create this AI task force so that we can be proactive in identifying what are the opportunities, but also, hey, what are the concerns that we have, that our Rhode Islanders have, that others have, so that we can ensure that our state is put in a position to succeed and maybe even be the leader in this AI revolution. Because it's important to have that conversation, not just about how great AI can be. As you all know, I love AI. I think it's a great thing. But I also am a realistic person and know that we have to be cautious of it as well. And the best way to do that is to have a discussion, to have a discourse, and to put some regulations in place where we can ensure that at the end of the day, it's a human-centered program.
Exactly.
That doesn't replace us, that doesn't put us in harm, especially with disinformation. There's an election cycle coming up, which for media buyers, it's an exciting thing, I'm sure. But there's a lot of misinformation that AI is going to have an impact on this race, I'm sure.
In the AI generated images in videos could dominate a news cycle, or create a very negative situation very quickly. You talked about being a leader in the AI front. And I think that there's an opportunity out there that I haven't seen anyone take yet. And it's to really educate high school students, and maybe even middle school students about what you and I are talking about right now, kind of the
Mm,
ethical issues. Because as you and I talked about, what 5 years looks like from now is going to be very different. And I think that teenagers need to be able to understand the basics, besides writing an essay and submitting it and getting it returned in English class.
right.
What they really need to know are how to spot this disinformation, and when AI may be appropriate to use and where it's not. And the more that we expose the youth to even just the basic concepts and capabilities of I think we'll be in a better spot because there's going to be a day when a lot of what's being asked in math class, someone can just go home and, it's kind of already here, but ChatGPT is just really exploding that. And I want to make sure that we are careful with how we teach the next generation about AI because they're going to grow up with it, they're going to live with it, they're going to use it every day, and that's going to be really important.
That's a great point. Education is one of the 5 pillars of the AI task force, just to kind of bring it back to what we were just talking about. You're spot on, Joe, right? We need to educate our K through 12 and well as our higher ed, prepare them for the workforce, which is our second pillar, because we need that excellent workforce that's ready for this new AI economy. Also, mitigate the job loss that is inevitably going to and already has happened. So, that's why it starts with education. We look at our workforce. We also look at our businesses, our small businesses and big businesses to help them adopt AI because, businesses are going to be adopting it. It's up to you if you're going to be like that, be one of them, or if you're going to kind of get left in the dust.
Yeah.
So that's why we're looking to help businesses adopt AI into their operations, into their sales, into their marketing. Customer service is a big one.
Yeah.
So those are 3 of the 5 pillars that are going to be impacted by AI, which affects our economy and the people that make up our great state and really all of the world.
I give you guys a lot of credit. I think that that's approaching it from a very smart way. And the more people that can talk about it, like your task force, I think the more we're going to come out of this in a place where people are really benefiting instead of losing. And that's going to be important.
That's exactly it. My goal is to have less heads in the sand and more people at least talking about it, even if they're saying, I'm scared as shit about AI. I want more people to at least communicate that, have a conversation with those that are educated about it, as well as those not educated about it, and have that uncomfortable conversation sometimes. One of our podcast guests was about he's in the industry where AI is heavily replacing them potentially, and they're in a big union dispute with performing arts in Hollywood, right? But we had that conversation to understand, what it's like from their side and what can we do to help out the people. At the end of the day, this is a tool for people. So we have to keep that in mind as this AI craze continues on, and it's not going anywhere. It's going to continue evolving, like you said. And if you were to look into the crystal ball, Joe, how do you see AI changing the advertising and marketing world over the next, I typically say 5 to 10 years, but because things change so rapidly, we'll say 2 to 5 years?
That's a really interesting question. And I think what we're going to see is more products come out like those Performance Max and Advantage Plus, whether it's from TikTok or someone else. But ultimately, we as marketers, I think the more we ask for transparency, the more likely it is that we're going to get it. And I think that that could be a good thing for everyone. Like you said, bringing AI into a task that frees up time gives you the opportunity to be more strategic. And, flexing those brain cells ultimately can help everyone in a company. So, I remain optimistic, cautiously optimistic. And, you know, there's no part of me that is ignoring the election. It's so interesting that you mentioned it because it's really been on my mind just seeing some of the images that are out there already. So there's a lot of negative, but there's also going to be a lot of positive. And as I look at it in the marketing industry, I think that it can really democratize information and the ability to process information in a really cool way. And we'll see how it works out.
We certainly will, and I thank you, Joe, for your time. If our audience wants to get in touch with you, learn more, what would be the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, I try to stay pretty active on LinkedIn. So Joe Leverone, and if you're interested in learning more about Breakthrough, Brkthru.com is a good place to start as well. So appreciate you having me on, Chris. This was a really productive discussion.
We could be talking about AI all day, so I guess we'll end it there. Thank you so much for joining us. I learned a lot. Hopefully, our audience learned a lot as well. Yeah, we'll talk soon. We'll see what the conversation's like in a year or two. We'll
Absolutely.
revisit it.
Awesome.
All
Thanks,
right,
Chris.
Joe. Thank you.
That was a fantastic interview with our host Chris Parisi and our guest Joe Leverone. I had a chance to chat with Joe during the pre-interview process, and I have to say, he is a terrific guy. At the AI Wave podcast, we really look for interview guests that have that drive, that passion for artificial intelligence and all that it can be in spaces that it's in, and Joe is no exception to that. It's already been said, but I'll say it again. Thank you for Joe for coming on our podcast. We really enjoy it, and we hope to speak with you soon. That's all we have for you today on the AI Wave podcast. Likes, subscribes, comments, shares, anything are always appreciated, and don't be afraid to give us your feedback. Trust me, Chris will happily have a conversation with anyone who wants to talk about AI. Thank you for tuning in, and as always, we hope you have a great time riding that AI wave.